surely you shouldn't talk to angels. I mean, that's worship. It's a question I hear a lot, or framed in different ways. How do we understand our working with angels? In this short video, I'll explore that a bit. I was in a room, in a house in Scotland. I'd gone there to pray. That was one of the main reasons I'd gone, to pray for Scotland and to pray for the UK as a whole. And I had an intense encounter in the middle of the night where I wrestled for a while. And it was powerful and exhausting, and I was ready to go to sleep. And at that moment, an angel appeared in my room. It was very powerful. I trembled in its presence, and it said this: I declare there will be no more coalition, and there is a year more of grace. I didn't understand what that meant at first, until when I woke up after having finally slept that night. I turned on the news and I remembered, it was general election night for the UK. I'd already sent my vote in postally, so it wasn't in my mind. To our surprise, the Conservatives were in. David Cameron, the returning Prime Minister, made a speech and said, we have a majority, there's no more need for coalition. And I'm like, whoa. I wondered what the year meant. A year later, roughly to that date, is when the referendum on leaving the EU happened, and we've decided to leave. Now, I'm not saying that the EU referendum, it was right or wrong to leave the EU. That's not the subject of this video. But I was astounded that this year that had been mentioned had now been fulfilled. Wow. I'll come back to that. But let's look at biblically talking to angels. What if Mary had said, I'm not going to talk to you, Gabriel, because you're an angel, and if I talk to you, that's worship? Well, she'd have missed out on the announcement, and it was rather an important announcement. And isn't it interesting that the most important announcement of the age, the birth of Messiah, is announced through an angel? That's interesting. You'd expect God to come down himself, but no. Gabriel comes and carries the authority of the word of the Lord to speak to Mary. Gabriel also appears to Zechariah in the temple, and he's struck dumb because he doubts that he will have a child. And he comes out and he's dumb, and I guess he writes and does sign language, and they work out he's encountered an angel. In that culture, there was an expectation of meeting angels. You see, in Acts 12:15, when Rhoda has answered the door because they're praying for Peter to be released out of prison, and there's a knock on the door, and she sees Peter, she goes back to the group and says, Peter's at the door. They don't believe her. In fact, they more likely believe it's his angel that's at the door than Peter himself, because that's what they say. Jesus, speaking to the crowd, in Matthew 18:10 says, don't harm these children because their angels behold the face of God constantly. Now that has weight in his argument, otherwise he wouldn't use it. And the implication, or the statement is that every child has an angel watching over them. So that's at least what it means. So angels are constantly involved in the affairs of man and in the purposes of God. Of course, there were people who didn't believe in the angelic activity at the time amongst the Jews. A whole group of them were called the Sadducees. In Acts 23:6-8, when Paul is giving his defense before the Roman governor, he discovers there are Sadducees there, so he starts to announce, I'm here because of my belief and the Pharisees' belief in the resurrection of the dead. And of course that incenses the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because the Sadducees are there going, this man is deluded. So at that time, there were a group of people who did not believe in angels, who did not believe in demons, who did not believe in spirits, who did not believe that there would be a resurrection of the dead. But the vast sweep of the culture was, no, these things were normal. This is how God interacts with the Jewish people and the world. But some people will quote Colossians 2:15, which talks about some of the people in Colossae who've become puffed up with their visions of angels, going into detail about them. But there's the real problem. It says they've become puffed up. It's not about angels. They insist, it says, on asceticism and on the worship of angels. Now, the worship of angels is not good, but angels are good. And if you don't interact to some degree with angels, you won't experience the purposes of God. And the fact is, if you're hungering and searching after God, you're already interacting with the angelic, whether you realize it or not. It's time to open your eyes more. It's time to sense these things more. So going back to the story I told you of my encounter with the angel in Scotland, you might ask, oh, what did that do for you? What did that do for me? It wasn't about me. It was about me being caught up in the purposes of God and being involved in that and seeing that. It was part of years of intercession before and after that event. It's not about whether I feel good about it. It doesn't make you more spiritual that you see the angelic. It's just the normal thing to experience more and more as you get caught up in the purposes of God. And that's what I'm praying for you right now as you listen to this, that you'll be caught up more and more in the purposes of God, and part of that will mean you'll be engaging with angels.